Hi, I'm Mary Ann Clyde.
And I'm Lorna McGill.
Welcome to
Yes.
the Isn't She Amazing podcast. Today we have another amazing woman that Lorna is going to introduce us to. So, Lorna.
Yep, so I'm really excited to introduce Cynthia Schneider. She and I met this earlier this year, and I feel like we've become fast friends. We have lots in common. Cynthia was in ministry for 15 years. She was also in the food services industry and helped build an organization from a small mom and pop type organization to a multi-million dollar company. And she, after she did that for about 25 years, she decided to switch careers. And the one thing that I loved when she sent over her bio that she and I had not had an opportunity to talk about is she considers herself a chief encouraging officer. So I love that. I might steal that title from her. So we'd love to just hear about your transition and just who you are and what what it's like to be a woman, an older woman that is kind of maneuvering something new and being very successful at it, I might add.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It is a privilege to be here. It is part of my current mission is to change the mindset of those of us who are seeing the runway before them to be shorter than the runway behind them, and how to make the most of the last years of our lives that we have. And I feel like we are at a place in life we have finally reached the place we have so much to give back. And so I'm really encouraging people, like, if you've got breath in you, you've got to reach back, and we've got to help bring these next generations, along with the rich wealth of wisdom that we learned through the schools of hard knocks, right?
Oh, and that is so right along our calling and our mission. So we love to hear that.
Yeah, because that's something Mary Ann and I talk about all the time is like we have so many gifts right now, and we're not invisible. And we collectively, I think that when we talk about Isn't She Amazing, collectively, what could we do? Because we have a lot.
Yeah. So I'll kind of start at the pivot point of my life that changed at 57. I had been in a career for 25 years. I thought I was going to ride into retirement in that career, and it abruptly ended.
Ooh.
And it was like my fifth child. I am the mother of four children, and raised my children while helping to build a business. And so I always thought of my work as kind of my fifth child. I loved what I did. It was so invigorating. I was in specialty food manufacturing. So if you've been in manufacturing, there's just this rhythm that drives you and brings so much energy to life. And I got to wear, it was a very small company. And so I got to wear so many different hats and learned so much throughout my career. And so when it ended, it was abrupt and it was painful. Here's how I liken it. Do you remember the little black pots that you get your plants in from your local home dealer, right? When I left that, now it took me about probably 4 years to be able to look back and see that it was really a blessing. But when it happened, it was very painful. So I now can look back and visualize my life being literally plucked out of that little black pot. And you just kind of, when you replant a pot or a plant, you shake off the roots and then you put it into fresh soil in a much bigger pot so it can continue to grow. And that's what I feel like happened to my life.
Wow.
You could not have told me that first year. But looking back now, I was literally replanted into a pot the size of my region, my community, where I have the opportunity to serve and influence others and help others in ways I could have never imagined at that point in my life.
Wow. Could I ask you a question about if you don't mind sharing how that ended? Because I think a lot of our viewers come into an abrupt ending for a variety of reasons. But I'm wondering if you mind sharing so that our audience can see your positivity coming out of what really hurt.
Yeah, it was, I think I had a couple months warning. I could feel a little bit of friction in the relationships with some of my coworkers. And I think we all just sensed that it was time. I think I had to get out of the way so that they could grow. I think more than anything, I'm a woman of faith. From a small child, God has been my source of balance and strength. And looking back now, I think he just knew it was time. I had done the job I was given to do there. I had served them and gotten to the place where they were they had moved to a new facility. They were growing. We were literally growing 50 to 100% for the last 15 years I was there. So you can imagine that pace of life. And I was tired. And I think they needed room to grow. And I think, but ultimately, I really believe that God just knew I needed to be moved, that it was time for a change in my life, and that I couldn't just kind of ride into the sunset, which is really what I was kind of in my mind. I mean, I was still growing and serving and working hard, but as far as personal growth, I think this was gonna be the way I ended. And he literally just reshaped my whole life.
Wow. Sudden endings are really, like you said, pulling out right out of the pot, and you're not quite ready, and your roots kind of get tangled up.
That's
in
a
that
wonderful analogy.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So it was how long before you found the top of Virginia?
It was about 9 months. So once it happened, I was really broken. And so I needed time to step back. I'd also neglected my physical health a lot, sat at a desk, 10 more hours a day. And so I just took the opportunity. It was a summer time. It was actually literally 9 years ago, just last couple weeks. I just determined I would reset my health, mentally, physically, spiritually. So I reached out to a good friend who's a health coach, and she began coaching me. She's been a mentor to me since I was a child, actually, since I was a teenager. And she's about 7 years older than me, and has just kind of mentored me all through my life in different areas. She's one of those friends that just weaves. Like, there were times we've been really close, and there's times we haven't talked for years, but we just weave in and out of each other's lives at the right time. So she helped me to kind of reset my health physically. I lost a lot of weight. I began walking regularly and exercising, and just working to get myself mentally in a health place. And I had to really, literally redefine who I was. This also happened right after my last child, my fourth child, had graduated from high school and was leaving for the Air Force.
Oh, empty nest.
He had just left for the Air Force. So everything about my life that I had known for those 25 years, raising children, working, having an identity through my work and my children, abruptly ended, really, over that 1 year span of time. So I started working on physically, mentally, and spiritually, as getting myself kind of back in place. And here was the really, I guess, life-changing shift for me. I looked at my mother one day, and I don't remember what prompted this, but I looked at my mom. She was in her 80s at that time, mid-80s, and she had worked till she was 80. She had run her own business. My mom and dad were entrepreneurs. My mom had always done the administrative side of the businesses, and my father was the salesman and the driver of things throughout our lives. And my mom and I were a lot of like in that I'm really strong in administration and organization. And I looked at my mom and I realized I will probably live into my 80s or 90s if I just base my life on genetics and nature, where I'm at health-wise at this point. And I had lived an easier life than my mother, much easier life than my mother. So I thought, I have to be prepared to live another 30 or 40 years. And then I looked back and I thought about what I had done in the 30 years prior to that, raising the 4 children, working alongside my husband. We have a ministry that we have out of our home, and then working. And I thought, I'm going to live the life I just led again without the demands of that life.
Isn't that just awesome when you realize that?
Yeah. And it was like, whoa. It stopped me in my tracks, and I thought, well, I cannot stop here, because I was, thinking, well, maybe I'll go ahead and retire. What will I do if I retire? And I thought, no, I had so much left to give. And that's when I started looking forward again. stopped, crying in my soup and, worrying and being undone. And I said, I've got to start rebuilding my life. And because I have a lot left to do in my life. And so then I just had to figure out, what do I want to do? And so I started thinking about, do I want to change my life completely? Do I want to go back to some of my earlier goals in life? My first goal, and this is probably an important fact, and probably many of you women, because we just tend to be helpers and nurturers. I never, as a young woman, I was born in 1957, so I grew up in the 60s, 70s. I didn't think about my career. I didn't think about what job I was going to have so much as what I wanted to do in life. And so I just wanted to help people. That was as far back as I can remember. I wanted to help people. That was kind of my driving motivation throughout my life. And so my first career I had in mind in high school was to become a psychologist. I wanted to help children and I wanted to be a psychologist. So I went to James Madison University and I was intent on going into child psychology. And I had just started studying the Bible at that time. And I realized that everything I was learning in the psychology classes were all principles that I was learning in the Bible. And I thought, well, if I really want to help people, I need to go know God. I need to get to know God. So a young ministry had started, my brother had gotten me involved in. And so I picked up and moved to Kansas and changed colleges and went into a biblical studies program. And so that was my first thought of how I was going to help, because ministry to me is about helping. And so I thought I was going to go into Christian ministry. And here's another line I've been thinking about a lot lately, is that change is inevitable, growth is optional. Mm-hmm. So I was completely engaged and involved in that ministry for 15 years. It's where I met my husband. We still to this day have a home church. But in the 1980s, that ministry imploded. Like many of the young ministries in the 60s and 70s, there was this, if you've all seen the new movie, The Jesus Revolution, I was that was my life. Watching that movie was like watching my life go before me. And so our ministry imploded. We had been out on the missions field at that time. And so we decided to come back home to Virginia and start over. So that was my first kind of do-over in life. Wow. Like that was my career. What do you do when your complete identity, poof, goes away again? Wow. And then the opportunity right after that, after moving here to Winchester, Virginia, opened for me I literally started doing data entry just a couple mornings a week while my youngest daughter at the time would go to preschool. And that's how I got started at that business, and then grew to be the director of operations. And so starting over has just been kind of a big part of my life. So when I started over at 57, an opportunity came up for me to go back to school. So I had all the work experience, but I didn't have the credentials for business because that had not been my course of study in my younger life. And so that was a little intimidating for me to try to re-enter the workforce. I didn't feel confident re-entering the workforce. I wasn't sure I had the proper language that would be used in other industries. And so opportunity came back. I went to the local community college and started taking some business courses and gaining my confidence to go back out into the workforce. And so those two things, I think, were the very pivotal points. Just looking at my mother's life, deciding that I wanted to keep moving forward, and then going and getting some education again, just to kind of rebuild my confidence.
Well, that took a lot of courage, because what Lorna and I talk about often is that courage comes before confidence. You had to take the risk to go in with the younger kids and do a new level of education, and you did that, and that's what made you feel like, oh wow, I can handle this new avenue in my life. And so congratulations for that.
I think that's a really important point for anyone starting over to remember, like, we're never not afraid starting something new. Mm-hmm. I think any fireman will tell you he's not afraid to run towards that fire. He just knows that the job needs to be done. And that's what courage is, right? It's not being afraid. It's being willing to be the one that steps out and takes the lead on making something happen.
That's right. And so
Yeah.
the results that you expect are much better and much more helpful and positive than the risk that you take going in. So I really admire that. That is great. I want to back you up just a little bit because I get stuck in a couple little details that I think the audience might be interested in knowing, because you said you went with a health coach and you knew you had to re-up your health, and you lost some weight and you got more active. I was just wondering, what are the main principles your coach taught you that kind of stuck in your head that worked for you?
Yeah, I still actually, most of those things I'm still practicing to this day.
Oh, good.
So a big one for me was literally just drinking water.
Yeah.
I am not a good water drinker. And so I have my daily bottles, and I like religiously, I don't get out of bed in the morning until I've drinking at least 16 ounces of water. And I typically go for the first 32 ounces of water within the first hour to 2 hours of my morning.
Wow.
I have this little personal rule. I don't let myself drink coffee till I've had at least 32 ounces of water.
Ooh, that would be such a tough rule for me.
And I have to do that because I will not drink throughout the day. So I have to like kind of force myself. I have this almost like a religious routine to me to get that first 4 glasses of water in my body in the morning. And then I carry my water bottle with me wherever I go, so that I never have an excuse. And usually by at least by the end of the day when I'm driving home, I can get that last round of water in.
One more glass.
You know, what works for me. So that's one. Walking regularly is one. I walk, I'm not walking as much as I was when I wasn't working. Then I was walking 4 or 5 miles, like 4 or 5 times a week. But I walk at least 1 to 2 miles, 3 to 4 times a week. And I have a little workout routine that I crafted while I was during that time, kind of picked out all the essential things from different videos and things that I that I do at least 3 to 4 times a week, and use some weights, 3 to 5 pound weights, nothing heavy, just kind of that's maintenance. And I think a big key for that, especially keeping it going now that I'm working full time again and my schedule is really packed, is doing at least 25 to 35 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week. And that's very doable. It's not extremely time consuming. I work out at home. I just don't have the time to go to a gym. That to me adds another hour to 2 hours sometimes to your day. And so that doesn't work for me at this point in my life. Those are 2. And then I take supplements, a good brand of supplements that I've used actually since, or I've known about since I was a teenager, and restarted doing those. I worked with a nutritionist during that time as well, so that we did blood work to make sure I was not just wasting my money on supplements, but I was taking what my body needed. And so those are 3 really major things that I've kept up.
Yeah, that is.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that, because I know, especially when women are in transition, and we deal with a lot of women that are in different transitions and so forth. And one of the things that's really important to keep your mental health up and your physical health up is to have a few principles that are guiding you that you can sustain over time. You know, it's one thing to go on a crash diet for a month or something like that, and then those principles are so often too difficult to really maintain for any reasonable life, you know. But the regular walking and the water, and those things are free.
Yes.
You know, that's you know, prayer and meditation, walking, breathing, you know, all that stuff that really makes us healthy is free. So I appreciate it.
And you know, like when people go through these transitions, or they're having such a hard time, because I was similar to you, Cynthia. I had such a hard time when the first part of my transition, and you think it's going to be something big that has to come into that you have to do to help you shift, but it's all those little things that really do help you. It's not like this big hard solution.
Right.
It's just, you have to do it. You have to do it.
That's the key. That is the key, is just to take that step. So,
Mhm.
okay, so you took the step and went to community college. You got your business acumen together and your confidence built up. And then tell us about how you started there.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember too, if you're starting over, the title doesn't matter. It's like, what do you want to do? So I had to like decide, now, what do I want to do? Do I want to go back to an original goal? Do I want to, try something new in life? Do I want to be a midwife? Do I want to be a doula? Those were all the like kind of things I played with in my mind, things that interested me through my life. And finally I settled in that, business is kind of in my blood. It's kind of what I love. And so, and I wasn't ready to quit working. So I, reached out to an old friend that I had worked with at one time. I saw they had a customer service rep in the insurance industry, and I was like, I could do that. I'll try that. And so I sent her my resume, and she was like, Schneider, this is entry level, right? And I'm like, yeah, but I'm starting over. That's okay with me. I'm willing to learn something new. Well, that interview, a third party from that company was in the interview, and she happened to hand my resume off to the chamber. And that's how I ended up at the Chamber of Commerce in the top of Virginia region. I didn't know what a chamber was at the time, but it is the most perfect fit for me at this point in my life. So I just think it was providential, that the way that it worked. And the other key element of that I think is really important is the opportunity to network, right? The best way to find a new path is networking. I wanted to go back to what you shared when we, in the midst of transition of, I think I discount, or I don't highlight enough, not only faith and prayer during that time, but those who joined with me in faith, prayer, and encouragement. My circle of friends are who kept me kind of buoyed up during that time. They were so gracious to listen to me process out loud and talk with me. Because, you're just mulling over in your mind, what went wrong? What did I do? What could have been different? Until you come to terms of realizing it was the right thing, you're kind of, looking back on, what was wrong. And really it was not about what was wrong. It was just,
it was time.
Yeah, it's think of a plant that's getting ready to bud, right? It's, I don't know that it's painful for that, but for us, change is painful. It's not always easy. And so that, that transition, times like birth, right? The hardest part of birth is transition. Once you're through transition, everything eases up a little bit. Once that baby's here, it's just, you don't even remember the back pain.
And now you're happy.
Right. So I think those are two other key elements that I would say were really part of the helpful thing is faith, and then friends and family that encouraged me and kept me strong and looking forward, and gave me a sense of myself during that transition.
That's what Lorna always talks about, how her community came around her.
Yeah, my community saved me. Yeah. And it's also interesting, like, who your community became. Like, there were some people that you thought were your community that really weren't, when that was really hard, and some people that came and you were like, I would never have thought that this person would have been such a support system to me. So it's just really interesting how that goes. But yeah, I think my community was the same. They saved me through that time, because there's a lot of doubt. You're like, I'm really good, but like, why couldn't I make that work? Or why wasn't it right for me? And then you're like, I have to move away from that. I have to just look forward, because you can't change what happened.
Right.
Oh, Lorna,
I regret that I spent too much time like trying to figure out what was wrong instead of just moving.
You can't do anything about it.
Right. It's done.
And so often the women will go to, what's wrong with me? What did I do wrong? Because we're so ingrained with raising kids. We're so ingrained with taking care of others and surrounding and supporting other people. And we tend to feel like the weight of the world is on our shoulders, and we're the ones responsible to fix the world. And when something changes, we take the blame for it. And
I have a question. So how was it for you when you made that? Like, all of a sudden, like, because our stories were very, very similar. You know, we became empty nesters, we left our jobs. But when you actually could say, like, I can do anything I want, like, what was that like for you? Because for me, I was like, what does that even mean?
I did not have enough confidence in myself. And here's where the story really switches and where I watched God just transform me and my life. So when I went to the chamber, I was the director of finance and administration. I'm like, great, I'm behind the scenes, doing what's easy for me. I love this. This is how I'll ride into the sunset. And at year 4 at the chamber, I was asked to become the CEO.
Wow.
And the story leading up to that is an absolute amazing testimony. But what the pivotal thing was that I realized that one of the strongholds in my life that was holding me back from being all that God had called me to be was self-doubt. And so I was actually in a Bible study at the time, and this is so pivotal. I was supposed to have met with the CEO and the chair of the board on a Friday, and I didn't know what the meeting was about. I assumed it was some kind of planning for the next year, and it got moved from Friday to Monday. On Sunday, I was finishing up a Bible study, and I realized that self-doubt and lack of confidence in myself was a stronghold, something holding me back. And I prayed this very flippant little prayer. I'm walking down the hallway, literally to the bathroom, and I was like, okay, God, if there's anything more that you want to do in my life, I promise if you open the door, I will walk through it.
Wow.
But you did not know.
I didn't know anything. I just prayed that prayer. I knew, if I think back on it, like I could just feel it in me. There was like this inspiration of just knowing, like, you are not doing all you're supposed to do. And it's not because you don't have the ability, it's because you are not confident. You're doubting yourself too much. So the next morning I walk into this meeting and they asked me to be the CEO of the chamber. Our chamber is a regional chamber with over 800 members. It's a pretty high profile job in my community. And when they asked, I was stunned. I had no idea it was coming. The CEO had only been there about 2.5 years. I had no expectation he was planning to step away. And so I literally started laughing. And often when I feel God has spoken to me or moved in my life, I get this, you know, the little bubble in comic strips, like words kind of hang in the back of my head. And when they said that, and the little bubble came right up and went, you just said yesterday to God, if you ask me to do anything, I promise I will walk through it, that door.
You're like, I can't break that promise.
Right? And so they go, I'm sure you'll want to talk to your husband about it. And I'm laughing inside going like, he has anything to say about it. Like, we'll have to contend with God. So went home. He was thrilled about it. Because I had said to him when I left my last career, you know, I'll never do that to us again, right? That was very demanding. He had held up a lot of the weight. And I want to give my husband credit because I could not have done what I've done in my life without a really great partner. He is, he allows me to fully exercise all that I am. And it is such a privilege and a gift to have a man that allows that. He's not intimidated by my strengths. He's confident in who he is and lets me be who I am. And that's such a gift to me.
Yeah, I have.
He was like, yeah, you know, you were built for this, go for it. The
Fine.
children, you know, again, them, even though they're grown adults, I want to be there for my children. I want to be involved in my grandchildren's lives. And so I was concerned as I crafted my new roles in life. Like I didn't want anything that would not allow that for me because that's my family and is priority to me. And it always has been, even in my first career. We were a family oriented company and they were wonderful about that. I brought my third and fourth children to work with me while I nursed them the first 9 months. They were just wonderful family oriented business in that regard. And So that was important for me, that my job would not get in the way of that. And the kids were all like, this is for you, Mom, go for it. You've done all you need to do for us. You go for it. So that's how I ended up in the CEO role. And as Lorna said, I like to call it Chief Encouraging Officer. It is an amazing privilege to help other people build their businesses now and mentor other young women as they're coming up in their careers and roles, and get to share the insight and the wisdom, as we started with, that this is our time to give back and to help bring others along. And so every day I just kind of pinch myself at the privileges I get to have such a large pot to grow in so many ways that I can reach out to others.
And what an inspiration you are to all those women and men too in the chamber. And just as a woman who grew up in her authenticity, and you kept your priorities in line, what I need to make this all work. And that happened for you. And so that's huge. And I really admire that.
And I still have to say, I just love the pot analogy. I love that.
Yeah. And I mean, literally, I feel like my life has just flourished in ways I could have never. My reach in the company was, had great vendors and customers that I worked with, but it's just a whole nother way that I get to flourish. And but that's why I feel like my pot is more like one of those big, beautiful porcelain hand painted pots now, instead of that little black industrial pot that I was in manufacturing.
But, and when you talk about, how you get the messages from God, I had something similar. I remember being in a staff meeting and sitting there, and I had been thinking about, I needed to make a change, but I was like, same thing. I'm like, this is like a great job. Like, why would I believe it? And I remember feeling this really heavy feeling that was like, this isn't where you're supposed to be. And I remember walking away and sitting at my desk and thinking, it's right. This isn't where I don't know where I'm supposed to be. And I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be doing, but the message was so clear.
Yeah, I actually got a similar message too.
How long did you stay, past that?
Not long, probably. It was probably March. I like 3 months, because I was like, I've got to get myself situated. But it was the longest 3 months for me, because it was hard, because I had already decided I wasn't going to continue.
So I think that's another key point for us all to think about. When you're getting that sense of something's not right, listen to it, because we tend to stay too long.
I had stayed years longer than I should have. I think I had been knowing that it really wasn't the right fit for me, wasn't fulfilling me. But I convinced myself, because of all the good things about it, and I had influence, and I could make a lot of difference, and there were lots of good things I was involved in, and that was very, I just like you said, I used to say, sitting behind that desk was a privilege. Because it was such a community asset. It was, but when you take that to your core, that's different than it's just being a job. It wasn't just a job for me. So I think that's harder to leave that.
Yeah.
And Cynthia, I think your point too is that women, again, don't like to quit. That we don't like to.
I'm going to do this. And I can fix it.
Loyal to a fault, right? And I think, So it took somebody else saying it's time, because I was loyal to a fault a number of times in my life, in a number of different. I was engaged when I was a young woman, and that same thing. Had I married that man, my life would not be the same today. And but I was loyal to a fault. I had made this commitment, and fortunately, it also ended abruptly. But it was the right thing, right? But I think women, we're dedicated, we're loyal, we're very laser focused when we get on something where we think we're doing good, and sometimes we help beyond need.
Yeah. So Cynthia, here something we ask our guests generally is you've given such good insights and said some pretty powerful things. If you had to give our audience an action step, women perhaps that are thinking of making a change, do you have an action step or a bit of advice that you would want to give those women?
Take the next step. You don't have to know what's beyond the next step every time. Just and throughout the transition time, those 9 months, my husband was great at encouraging me, just take the next step and see where it leads you. He'd encourage me to go on interviews that I had no interest in. Because he said, you don't know where that will lead to. And it will just build your confidence in your interviewing skills. Because I had never, hadn't interviewed in 25 years, right? And so, there was this one interview, it was over the mountain. I wasn't going to want to travel that job, but he was like, just go do it. Just take that step. You don't know where it'll lead. It'll give you confidence. And so that's the big key. And I see that over and over again in my current role. Maybe there'll be a meeting I'm supposed to go to, and I'm like, I don't know why I'm going to go to that meeting, or I'm tired tonight. I don't really want to go to that. But if just show up, just take the next step, just show up. Every time something good comes out of just showing up, taking that next step and showing up.
That's amazing advice.
That is amazing.
Thank you so much for sharing your heart and your mind with us and your transition. And we really appreciate that. Lorna, anything else before we close?
No, it's just been such a joy to get to know you better. And you're doing great work out there. Continue being that chief encouraging officer.
Yeah. Thank you,
You know what's
Cynthia.
really funny? I was a cheerleader from the time I was 8 till I was 18. And so it's interesting, the things in your young life that are just kind of the core of who you are, right? And they continue to show up throughout your life.
We talk about that a lot. Is like looking at your young self and saying, like, who was I? Because I think women, we lose who she was along the way, because we're trying to be what everybody wants us to be, or we're trying to be what everybody needs us to be, and we lose who we are. I'll tell you one quick story. So I was always known, I have 2 uncles that called me Lucy, and anybody that knows me knows that I'm very serious. Like, I'm very driven. And they called me Lucy because I was Lucille Ball. And so I thought back to that, and I was like, I must have been kind of funny and silly and goofy. Like, where did that girl go? And so I feel like I bring a little bit of her into me now.
All right, Lucy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I just want to encourage you ladies. I think what you're doing is amazing, because I think there's a generation of women with so much wealth of wisdom that they have gained and don't really realize what they have. Right?
Oh, right. We agree with you 100%.
Unwrapping the packages of us girls and getting us back out there.
There you go. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you to our audience for joining us, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
Bye-bye.